the end. Okay, so again, I have the honor of introducing Willie. So Dr. Willie Daniel Kaipo Kauai holds a PhD in political science from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He was born on the island of Maui in the rural district of Kula. He currently serves as the Director of Native Hawaiian Student Services at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Dr. Kauai is a former instructor of ethnic studies, Hawaiian studies, and political science. Wow. His teaching and research interest focuses on the politics of race in Hawaii and its historical and contemporary intersections with law. He is also a really good basketball player, just throwing that in there. But anyways, thank you, Dr. Kauai, for being here, and it's all yours.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you, Reina. Thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me into this space. Really grateful to share some time with you all. I once lived right next to Reina's office. My office was rather close, and so through the years we've been able to do some different kinds of collaborations with National Student Exchange, including a couple of orientations that I've done for students coming into to Hawaii. Some of that presentation that I've done in the past will be included in this this presentation that I put together. This presentation is also meant to give you all some resources. So kind of spread and interdispersed throughout this this presentation are different links that offer different kinds of literature about Hawaii, particular to the kinds of questions that were being posed. I will be playing a couple of video clips, a small piece of a podcast, all of which will be available to you all at the end of this this session. So really, it's kind of an audio-visual presentation, if you will, meant to give you all and your students the resources that you need when they visit Hawaii. But with that said, thank you, and I'll get started. Reina, how's this visual? How's the audio? Okay.
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, you can see. Okay. So Beyond the Beach, Hawaii. I enjoyed tackling this.
Actually, I'm sorry, just to stop you real quick. There is a black bar on the right side of your screen. I'm not sure if that's a pop-up, but it's obscuring part of the presentation.
Oh, it's the. There, does that work? Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I can still see it on the bottom left, but that doesn't obscure.
Huh. Sorry, I can't see that.
Reina, can you see it on your screen?
I can, and it keeps changing shapes and sizes.
Is it because I'm not in presentation view on Zoom?
I'm not sure. Right now, it's pretty large and blocking the bottom of the screen. But like I said, now it changed size and it's small and it's only in the bottom left. It's still visible, but it's not blocking anything right now.
Yeah, I would say go with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me. This is a presentation I had mentioned, kind of had some fun with in putting together, as Reina had mentioned before. Taking on the position of the Director of Native Hawaiian Student Services, I did lecture in various social sciences fields, and so As you'll notice throughout this presentation, that's definitely kind of the angle that that I've taken in providing this this presentation. Just some background. So as the Director of Native Hawaiian Student Services, our unit is responsible for providing support, both academic, financial, overall well-being to the Native Hawaiian population that attends UH Manoa. UH Manoa is home to the largest population of Native Hawaiians engaged in higher education. Currently, there are close to about 2,800 students that attend UH Manoa. 2,800 Hawaiian students that attend UH Manoa. That accounts for about 15 or 16% of the general population. Native Hawaiian Student Services was created about 10 years ago with the mission and the goal to start to address some of the institutional barriers that have affected or impacted Native Hawaiians from accessing higher education. If you note that percentage of 15% of the population is below parity when measured against the overall general population in Hawaii, it's about 10% less than the general population. Native Hawaiians, for a long part of the history of the university, have not had the greatest ability to attend, especially the flagship, UH Manoa. Within the University of Hawaii system, which is a 10-campus system, UH Manoa as the flagship, there has always been an underrepresentation of Hawaiian students, an underrepresentation of Hawaiian faculty, an underrepresentation of Hawaiian administrators at the flagship institution. In comparison to the other campuses within the 10-school system, in particular the community colleges, Hawaiians are overrepresented in these areas. And so our office, of course, along with various other offices on our campus, was created to address some of these disparities. Here, this is our newly renovated, close to 3,000 square foot student service space that you will find upon walking into the larger Kuilili'okalani Center for Student Services building, which I want to say, Reina, you're still there, or once were in this larger building. But essentially, this building is the hub for all student services. This, of course, this particular space is important. It's a space that allows students to feel welcomed, allows students to engage in different programming that we offer throughout the year. And if you look towards the back of the space, behind the bookshelf, that is where you'll find the faculty and staff. So this is our hub. This is kind of a one-stop shop for Native Hawaiian Student Services, Native Hawaiian students looking for any kind of services. If you'll notice on the bottom of, here, how do I do this? If you notice on the bottom, this is our mission. This is a mission statement that you probably won't find in too many other places throughout the University of Hawaii system. It is one that I've often characterized as unapologetic, one that I think brings into conversation discussions of occupation, discussions of colonialism, into what that means when it comes to higher education, right? The fact that Native Hawaiians are not represented proportionally at UH Manoa also means that Hawaiians are represented in other places, in other social economic areas. Hawaiians in particular are some of the most incarcerated in Hawaii, some of the most undereducated, an ethnic group that faces various kinds of inequalities in their own homeland. Native Hawaiian Student Services looks and brings these kinds of critical discussions into our programming, into our philosophy. One of the things that we also put out there, and I'll talk about this a little later in this presentation, is the idea that prior to US occupation, prior to the Americanization of the islands, Native Hawaiians were a thriving people. Native Hawaiians, prior to the illegal annexation in 1898, Hawaiian society, in fact, was considered one of the most literate societies in the world, right? Reaching universal literacy rates, or close to universal literacy rates. Some scholars say close to 90% of the population was literate, of course, in not just the Hawaiian language, but in multiple languages. So it's within kind of, you know, the evolution of the university that Hawaiians go from being one of the most literate people on the face of the world to one of the most illiterate, to one of the most incarcerated. And really our programming and the design of our programming really puts that into context. I have a little clip here that I'll play, which I think provides a good understanding of how we take on student services at UH Manoa, how we think about programming, how we bring into conversation, you know, this critical lens, but also providing students with an understanding of the excellence that their ancestors once demonstrated. This particular program, it's called Hawaiian Youths Abroad. If you see it, I'll play it in a second, but I have it up here. It's a 2-minute trailer, and it documents a cohort of students that we took to Europe. At the University of Hawaii, we realized that Hawaiian students in particular were not engaging in the different kinds of study abroad programs. And for those reasons, we decided to put together kind of our own study abroad program. This program took King Kalakaua program in the 1880s. So in the 1880s, Kalakaua, King of Hawaii, he sent 19 Hawaiians into 6 different countries throughout the world to go and get trained in a particular field, with the idea that they would come back and serve the lahui, or serve the country. Native Hawaiian Student Services in 2018 and 2019, we took 2 cohorts of undergraduate students and graduate students to follow some of those students, but also to uncover the rather large Hawaiian footprint that exists in Europe and really throughout the world. Let's see if I can play this. So that's an example of some of the programming that we offer. There's of course a mix up and a mashup of history in there with a student services angle to it or bend to it. This is a picture probably in the 1930s of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'd spoken a little bit about this earlier. If you notice in this picture, and the University of Hawaii opened its doors officially in 1907. 1907 is about 10 years after Hawaii is illegally annexed. The campus, for the most part, becomes a laboratory, in essence, a center that's dedicated to promulgating or developing agriculture in the islands, particularly cash crops such as sugarcane and pineapple. As you can see, surrounding the campus in its early days are different kind of ag stations and crops. I do want to point out that, and this is not necessarily a narrative that we hear too much coming from the university, and one that our unit, among others, tries to remind the university of. If you look up here in the upper right-hand corner, this is a copy of the legislative laws that were passed in 1892. One of the last laws that are passed in the Hawaiian Kingdom before the overthrow takes place in 1893 is the creation of the Bureau of Forestry and Agriculture. That Bureau of Forestry and Agriculture, which is debated and passed in the 1892 Hawaiian legislature, is signed off by the Queen on January 4th, 1893, so about 12 days before the country is invaded. That particular law and that particular bill that was passed that created the Bureau of Forestry and Agriculture actually is the predecessor to the University of Hawaii. This is an important story that was only recently, I think, uncovered within the last maybe 4 to 5 years. A faculty member within our department had noticed that this bill was tied to the function and the creation of the University of Hawaii. This has become an important story in the narrative that we tell, especially to Hawaiian students who are prospects of coming to the university. In particular, because as you can see in this picture, and if you were to walk through our campus today, the racial landscape of our campus indicates that there is very little Hawaiian involvement in the origin or evolution of the campus. Most of the names actually all of the names on our campus, with the exception of a couple, including the Queen Liliuokalani Center for Student Services, are not named after Hawaiian people. In fact, the places in which you will find Hawaiian names on our campuses are usually places where you eat and you sleep, right? And so just those psychological aspects of how the aesthetics of a campus turn out to be are also ones that we are very thoughtful and engaging. In doing so, we bring to light the fact that the University of Hawaii has its roots, comes from, or its origins come from a time before the United States gets here. In fact, going a little further into that conversation, the University of Hawaii is actually not the first institution of higher education that is propped and developed in Hawaii. Throughout the 19th century, there are a number of higher education institutions that are being created. A lot of them today are actually make up the bulk of the private schools that you would see. You have schools such as schools in the 19th century, such as Iolani. Iolani was created in the 1850s. It was a higher education institution. Punahou was created in 1841, another higher education institution. Lahaina Luna, the earliest higher education institution in Hawaii, in the Pacific, and also west of, I think I get this right, west of the Rockies in the US, opens its doors in the 1830s. And it was a school for teachers and teacher training. This, again, is another important narrative that we impress upon our students, is the sense that higher education is not something that's new to us. Despite the underrepresentation that we face on our own campus, we have a genealogy of excellence, a genealogy of education, a genealogy of higher education that's embedded in our stories, in our mo'olelo. As I recounted earlier, Hawaii is one of the most literate countries in the world in the 19th century. And of course, that doesn't just happen out of a whim, but that's something that is intentional. The Department of Education, which is still in place today, actually originates from legislation that was passed in the 1840s and the 1850s. So similar to these legislative laws that I show here, there is, in the 19th century, close to 1,000 schools that are created throughout the islands. So these are important stories that we feel we need to center when we engage with our current students or even prospective students. Sorry, I went too far. Getting into, some of the cultural pillars of Hawaii, and really getting us to think about notions of sustainability beyond, some of the more ubiquitous ways in which we're used to understanding sustainability today, beyond the Whole Foods definition of sustainability, beyond the Toyota Prius definition or Tesla definition of sustainability, is the idea that Hawaiians were practicing a very significant and sophisticated kind of sustainability for nearly 2,000 years. Hawaii is one of the most, if not the most isolated place on the planet. And so living in an environment in which you are completely dependent upon the ecosystem in which you are surrounded, in which you do not have the ability to import food as we do today. Currently, 85 to 90% of Hawaii's food is imported. That, of course, creates a lot of future problems. Before Captain Cook arrives in 1778, the population of the islands, some argue, were between 500,000 and 1 million. Today, there are roughly 1.5 million people that live throughout Hawaii. And the idea that our ancestors 250 years ago would be able to survive is because of the science, is because of the sophisticated agriculture that they engaged with. Today, many of us don't own our own land, don't have access to natural resources to grow our own foods. And so this question of sustainability is important. Here you see some of the kind of cultural pillars of Hawaii when it comes to sustainability. In the upper right-hand or left-hand corner here, this is a picture of a local i'a, or a fish pond. Fish ponds are basically nurseries or habitats for small fish. The idea is small fish come into the fish pond, get too big, get too fat, get too plump, and are unable to escape. And there you have, what some might consider a refrigerator in the old days, right? It's also a way that Hawaiians scaled down 10 million square acres of the Pacific into, a 2-acre fish pond, a 5-acre fish pond. Some of these fish ponds still do exist. Actually, a lot of them still do. Courses at the University of Hawaii take place at these fish ponds. In particular, on the windward side of the island here in Oahu, there is an 88-acre fish pond that's still intact, that's currently being restored, and that is now a place where fish is being grown as well. On the bottom right-hand side, this is kind of your prototypical picture of what a wetland kalo or taro field looks like. The idea is that cold fresh water runs through these terraces off of a nearby river. The runoff is diverted back into the river, and you have the creation of what is known to be Hawaii's most prominent crop or staple. Here in the left, the larger picture is a picture of a double hull sailing canoe. For those of you that are familiar and have been tracking the worldwide voyages of Hokulea, these are traditional wayfinding, traditional ways of navigation, traditional vessels that were used to sail across the Pacific. So this is what a double hull sailing canoe, a replica of it, might look like, or might have looked like when Hawaiians first arrived from Tahiti in Hawaii. This is also somewhat of a replica of what Hokulea looks like today as well too. These to me make up some of the foundation of Hawaiian culture pre-contact, but also, again, many of these elements are still with us today. They're in the process of being restored. And actually, every single element here, every kind of aspect of this culture is actually integrated in courses at the University of Hawaii. There is a course on agriculture, soil science, the science of growing kalo. As I had mentioned, there are marine science courses that happen at fish ponds, and there are astronomy courses or courses that look into traditional navigation. Sorry, I keep jumping ahead. One of the aspects of Hawaii that I think is important to come to know as well is with regard to diversity. In Hawaii in the 19th century, Hawaii was a cosmopolitan country. In particular, the Hawaiian Kingdom's constitution, citizenship laws afforded people of different ethnic backgrounds, of different colors, of different classes to come to the islands, to naturalize, to become a Hawaiian citizen. And they were afforded all the rights and privileges therein. A little more about Hawaii's kind of move from what people might say antiquity to modernity. Hawaii is the first non-European nation in the world to be recognized as an independent state. By the time the 1890s come around, there are more than 100 Hawaiian delegations and offices spread throughout the world. The Hawaiian Kingdom has treaty relations with practically every single country in the world in the 19th century. The development of the Hawaiian Kingdom with regard to public infrastructure was very much ahead of its time. Iolani Palace, which is the seat of the executive branch of the constitutional monarchy, is created in the 1880s. It is known to have electricity before the White House has electricity. Iolani Palace also has electricity before Buckingham Palace, in part because Kalakaua, who built the palace, is also the first king to circumnavigate the world. Kalakaua goes to close to 50 cities and ports throughout the world in the 1880s. On his stop back from, on his way back to Hawaii, he ends up in New York, where he is able to meet Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison sends an apprentice back to Hawaii with Kalakaua. That apprentice helps to create a hydroelectric dam, which becomes the source of electricity for Iolani Palace in 1888. Along with, I mentioned literacy as another form of modernity, the creation of higher education, but public healthcare was also another, I think, significant development in the 19th century. Mind you, the Hawaiian population goes from close to, like I mentioned, some say 500,000 to 1 million, to about 50,000 100 years later. And so death by foreign disease was a pandemic. It was everywhere, and it was responsible for killing off close to 60–70% of the Hawaiian population. In responding to that death, the great death that's taking place, leaders of the Hawaiian Kingdom create some of the most progressive medical institutions in the 19th century. Actually, those institutions still exist with us today. Queen's Hospital, which is in downtown Honolulu, was created in the 19th century as well by Queen Emma and Kamehameha IV, Alexander Liholiho. Kapi'olani Hospital, which is named after Queen Kapi'olani Hospital, is still in existence today. It was created in the 19th century as well, as a hospital for women and children. So you had a very progressive country in Hawaii. Healthcare was at no charge, so there was universal healthcare, and along with this kind of infrastructure that you've seen within the Hawaiian Kingdom, as I had mentioned, there were citizenship laws that were inclusive of different races. Here are two examples. This is Anthony Allen. He is considered the first African-American to find his way to the shores of Hawaii. He takes advantage of the Hawaiian Kingdom's inclusive citizenship laws. He naturalizes and is afforded all the rights and privileges of a Hawaiian citizen therein. He becomes a businessman, and he is also considered to be the first person to establish a resort in Hawaii or in Waikiki. The woman here in the picture is Betsy Stockton, considered to be one of the first Black women who arrive in Hawaii. Unlike Anthony Allen, she doesn't naturalize, but she still is afforded all the rights and privileges therein. Betsy Stockton becomes a school teacher. And mind you, these are two individuals who are coming from the United States, who are still faced with enduring the horrific problems of the institutionalization of slavery. Right? These are examples of former slaves escaping the grips of white supremacy in the United States, finding their way to the shores of Hawaii, and having a life very different from the one that they experience while living in the United States. cannot tell. Today, this is a picture of different military installations and bases that are in Hawaii. Hawaii is one of the most militarized, if not the most militarized place on the planet. This map gives you an indication of where different military installations are held. Just on the island of Oahu alone, roughly 20 to 25% of the entire island is occupied by the military. That, of course, creates very challenging living conditions in and on an island in which land and access to land is very scarce. Access to just housing is very scarce. Just recently, this made national news, but the US military, in particular the Navy's fuel storage system failed, or has been failing for decades now. And in this past year, a major discharge or leak of jet fuel began to get into one of Oahu's most utilized aquifers. This picture here on the right is Pearl Harbor, or what is known as Pu'uloa, but this is an image of jet fuel being flushed from the military bases in Oahu. And this, of course, is a part of, a much larger and historic, sorry, I cannot move this. A much larger and historic militarizing of the islands. This is a newspaper article that comes from the San Francisco Call in 1897. This is written by Marion Michelson, who at the time is an American journalist, somebody who is very in tune with American women's rights and that particular movement as early as the latter part of the 1890s. She makes her way to the islands to document one of the organizations called the Women's Hawaiian Patriotic League in Hawaii in 1897, who is responding to the prospect of the United States annexing the islands. One of the, and this is where this article comes from, Marion Michelson attends a rally or a speech in which two women, Aima Navahi and Ku'aihelani Campbell, are giving an eloquent and politically riveting speech denouncing in front of a group of 400 people the prospect of the United States illegally annexing Hawaii. There are great responses. These women in particular helped to gather and garner almost 40,000 signatures in the 1890s that were geared towards protesting and pushing back against the United States' attempt to seize the islands. Of course, as history has played out, the US occupation of Hawaii begins on August 12th, 1898. Hawaii is taken as a refueling station to fortify war efforts in the Philippines against Spain. At the time, the Spanish-American War is happening on two fronts, one front in the Caribbean and one front in the Pacific. Hawaii is taken in 1898 to fortify that war front in Spain. And really since 1898, you see the continued militarization of Hawaii until this very day.
Willie,
Yes.
Maybe we have time for about 5 more minutes before I move on to the student speaking part.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Um, just here's another article that was recently published. I want to say that this is from the National Geographic, but it looks into some of the issues that have come about as a result of militarism, as a result of over-tourism. This particular article focuses on the Micronesian experience in Hawaii. Micronesians have been coming to Hawaii for decades now, in part because they are seeking medical attention. The United States, throughout the 20th century, did massive bombing and militarizing of their islands there. But like many other ethnic groups, Micronesians find themselves in very challenging situations. This, of course, pushes back against larger tropes that consider Hawaii, a melting pot, a multicultural paradise. Digging a little deeper, you find that it's not. Here at the bottom, I have a little link here. This is to an offshore podcast. It's called A Killing in Hawaii. A Killing in Waikiki. It documents the killing of a Hawaiian man by a U.S. armed official in 2010, and again, really kind of debunks this idea that Hawaii is a multi-ethnic melting pot, a racial paradise, if you will. I'll kind of wrap it back into the University of Hawaii. This is a mural that was erected at the University of Hawaii in protest of the 30-meter telescope that the University of Hawaii, along with other partners, have been wanting to erect in the last 10 years. It pushes against the university claiming or aspiring to be a Hawaiian place of learning. And it suggests that instead of building the telescope, Hawaiians should be accountable. Hawaiians should be standing with the people. Of course, 4 or 5 years after this mural was created is when you see the mass of protests take place on Mauna Kea in the last 2 years. This is very much at the center of the university till this very day. And it is one that I think students gain and garner a much broader understanding of social justice issues in the islands. Mauna Kea Mauna Kea, I think, is one example of how your students are engaged in these kinds of social justice issues, with the understanding that hopefully our students, even those that only visit for a couple of months, develop a sense of empathy, not just for the people, but for the issues that these people are facing. I'll kind of wrap it up with a couple more slides. I'll just run through, and I'll just do it here. Here are, and this is I think more for the coordinators, but of course for the students as well too. This is kind of a selection of different publications in recent years and historically that have come out. These feature professors currently at UH Manoa and different professors throughout higher education throughout the US landscape. Along with these kind of more social sciences, history type of publications that I would encourage all of you to come to know, is also, I can't leave out our beautiful and talented Hawaiian faculty who comprise those in the STEM field. I don't have pretty and shiny glossy books like the social scientists do, but their faces will do. These are just a couple of the emerging scholars at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and other places in the world who are doing tremendous work in the STEM field. The STEM fields have become an increasingly more popular place for Hawaiian students to venture into. And a lot of that has to do with the rise of Hawaiian faculty in these fields, right? The idea that if you can see yourself in some of these scholars who may talk a little like you, come from similar backgrounds as you, that you too will be able to one day reach the heights of professorship as well too. I'll just end with just a little blurb, and I'll be able to give this to you, Reina, for you to share with the rest of the group. This is our social media following. And when you get a chance, I won't play this now, but there is a spoken word piece that I was meaning to end with, done by the late professor of Hawaiian Studies, Dr. Kanalu Young. And with that said, I will wrap that up, and I apologize for going over.
No need to apologize at all, Willie. Thank you so much. I always love hearing you speak. I could listen to you speak for hours. Thank you for sharing. We're happy to welcome now our student speakers. So we'll have Kaylee start. So Kaylee studied, exchanged at Hilo in spring, and she will be sharing her experiences. So thank you, Kaylee.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Kaylee. I am from upstate New York, in the Albany County area. And I do not come from money whatsoever. So I wasn't expecting to be able to go to Hawaii. I really wasn't, because I didn't know about NSE either. But I've always wanted to go, not necessarily for the beach getaway, but just because I've always wanted to learn more about the culture itself. And I knew that to be able to learn it properly, I'd have to go learn it from the people, because that's the only way you can really learn from it. So when the opportunity presented itself, I had to grab it and run with it. And so even though I'm an early childhood special education major, I took, I think, 3 history-based courses based on Hawaii, and I even did a new course called IS 194, where we actually got to learn more about the culture and specifically place names and significances of the Big Island, which I thought was extremely beneficial to learning about the culture and just learning about how significant things are, like the Aina, the language, the names for it, and it was really great. And it was really nice to just be able to be so immersed in that part of the culture instead of having it all just be like, oh, well, margaritas on the beach, because I've definitely been breaking down those stigmas here at home, just because a lot of people don't know anything other about Hawaii than oh, it's part of the US and there's beaches and you don't need a passport. So really just I come home and be like, yeah, I went to the beach maybe 5 times. They're like, oh my gosh. So that part's been great. But so yeah, it's what you make of it, and it's definitely doable. And the people that I met there, we call each other our Hawaiian Ohana, which is so awesome. I'm currently finding a way to give back to them, not permanently, but definitely to see each other again and just to be able to reconnect, because it's what you make of it. And if you do it right, you give that aloha to people, they give it right back, and then all of a sudden you have this whole community across the continent and across half an ocean waiting for you to return. So it was really great. Let me know if I left anything out.
That was perfect. Thank you for sharing. Now we're happy to welcome John, who exchanged at Manoa in spring. Thank you, John, for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So yeah, originally I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and unlike Kaylee, I did actually come here for the beaches at first. I think that first day in Iowa was -12 when I was leaving home, so it was nice to get some warm weather. That being said, though, after my time here, it's become a lot more than just like a beautiful place. I took 3 different classes learning about Hawaiian culture. One of them was about Polynesian surf culture. That was actually really interesting as well, because it's a completely different look, but we got to go around to the different parts of the island that we probably wouldn't have known about. I would recommend that class to anybody that's coming over here. Ian Masterson's a great teacher. So just kind of getting to like view it from that perspective and learn how like important the land is here to the people. I think that was a really cool thing that I guess I've never really had appreciation for, being from Iowa. There's so much meaning here. And then kind of like beyond that, the culture and the people, it's amazing. There's kind of like that stereotype, oh, everybody's just like chilled out and relaxed. And that's true, but you have to like treat them with respect. You have to treat their home with respect, and then you'll get that right back. Kind of like what Kaylee said, give aloha and you'll get it back. So just kind of that experience and getting a job and working with some Hawaiians, it's been a wonderful experience. Beyond that, kind of just the differences between, my home campus at Iowa State and then here. Again, it kind of comes back to people and the culture a little bit. Everybody here is excited to go do things and experience and kind of just live. Back home, to be brutally honest, it gets cold and dark at 5 p.m. and there's nothing else to do. So people just go to the bars and hang out. So this has been wonderful to actually get out and live and enjoy and experience new things and immerse myself in a new culture. And then the last thing, kind of like what to expect for students coming here in the future. I was one of those people that, I just wanted to come to see the cool things and experience the nice weather. But it's so much more than that, and you grow a ton as a person. This is the first time I've really been away from home. Being 4,000 miles away, I've got to learn how to do things on my own. And I think that's been one of the most important things, is how to immerse yourself in a new community. And I guess this can be applied to anywhere you go. Every community has its own culture, and learning how to make ties and make friends and fit in. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just learning how to be on your own a little bit. And it's just been wonderful. So thank you.
That's so awesome. Thank you very much for sharing, John. Okay, thank you to all of our speakers here. You guys are amazing. We appreciate you sharing your expertise and experiences. And now we're happy to open the floor to questions for Dr. Kawai or our student speakers, Kaylee or John. Okay, so thank you, Ashley. She has a question. If we remember the names of the Hawaiian, surf courses you took. I think, John, you had mentioned you took a surf culture course. Do you know what department and number, or maybe a name?
Yeah, it was Anthropology 175. And it was, with Kumu Masterson. He's awesome.
Thank you, Anthropology. And sorry, right when I unmute, my son comes in. But thank you, John.
I think you're muted right now.
Oh, sorry, that was intentional. I was telling my kids to leave the room. But yes, other questions? While we wait for questions to come in, I did want to mention that at Manoa, and I'm sure Holly does the same for Hilo, we do provide students with a list during registration or before registration, a list of courses that focus on Hawaii from all departments. So not just Hawaiian studies, but anthropology, sociology, a list of courses that they could just kind of expand their knowledge and experience the islands a bit more. So we have a lot of students actually who take Hawaiian Studies 107, which is kind of like a all-encompassing course at Manoa. Kaylee, it sounds like you took a similar course at Hilo. So we always encourage students to enroll in those.
I had a quick question, Raina, and also Holly. How do you prepare incoming students for sort of ethical aspects of being a student, but also a traveler to Hawaii. Do you do much before their arrival? I know you do extensive in-person orientations, but can you both talk about that?
Of course, that's a great question. Holly, I'll let you go first.
Let me unmute. When I'm kind of sending out emails to the students prior to arriving, I do mention a little bit about, little things here and there, but not so heavy on the whole cultural thing. I try to save it for orientation, but I did do something a little bit different this past year, is where I had, I don't know if we did it for spring, Katie, but for fall, we had like a orientation, not orientation, but like a question and answer thing for students prior to arriving to Hilo, and if they had any questions. And actually a lot of the students did ask, how do I enjoy my time in Hawaii without being disrespectful to the community? So that's something we talk about, but yeah, I can't remember if we did it for spring. But yeah, normally during orientation, we sort of touch a little on that. But I don't know, Reina.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So we try our best to also kind of prepare students ahead of time. So we have virtual meetups prior to the start of the semester, in addition to like webinars focused on specific topics like housing. But we have these virtual meetups, which are just like informal opportunities for students to meet online prior to coming. And that's always a topic that comes up. We talk about Pidgin, Hawaiian, Creole English, Pidgin, that's the kind of the local way of speaking. We touch upon culture and little things that people do here that they'll probably take them by surprise when they see it the first time here. We cover it at orientation. We do some fun activities at orientation. We encourage students to enroll in the courses related to Hawaii. Students coming for this academic year are special because we have the help of Dr. Kawai and this webinar right now. And then the student speakers. So in our webinars over the summer or prior to the start of the semester, we have student speakers, students who've been on exchange already, and they talk about their experience. And that always comes up, and they kind of share, just like John and Kaylee have, like what it was like when they first came here and their expectations and things that they learned. So it comes up that way as well. We try our best, but it's always, they understand it when they see it, when they experience it themselves. And also just to add, there's a ton of like great YouTube or TikTok. I'm not that great at TikTok, but students have said there's lots of TikTok videos about what it's like living here and the culture and the way of speaking and doing things here. And I had students comment that they've learned a lot from TikTok and YouTube videos.
Yeah, sometimes it can get a little tricky where we don't want to offend students coming in, but then at the same time, some things need to be said. So, but most students are very understanding and they appreciate that we're trying to educate the students on our culture and just, how things are done here. So yeah, it's been interesting. So I've shown a lot of the TikToks to our students and they just laugh, but I don't know if they understand, but because they're speaking Pidgin, but we're like immersion right away.
Yeah, that's awesome, Holly. Do we have any other questions? Sorry, go ahead, David.
I'll ask one more question, sorry. How do you recommend other coordinators talk about Hawaii and the opportunity to exchange to Hawaii to our prospective students on our campus? I mean, I will say that I I do talk about, well, the beach, and, I'm here in Minnesota, students want to go warmer places and ocean, near oceans and things. So do you have recommendations on how to go beyond that, other, selling points that we should make sure that we talk about?
Absolutely. You always have the best questions, David. Dr. Kawai, if you don't mind, could I have you start us off with that response as the expert here?
One of the things that I think is important for students to consider, and I've kind of laid that out in the presentation, is, there are a lot of, Hawaii is very unique, and there are a lot of opportunities for students to understand, the multitude of issues that impact Hawaii and its people. I think that students coming here will find themselves in a living laboratory, a living social science laboratory. And the only way, I think, for students to really get a grip on that is to really find ways to engage with the community. I heard kind of John speak to that that point, but immersing yourself in the different societal struggles that different ethnic groups are facing. There are, I think, a number, along with taking Hawaiian focused or Hawaii focused courses. There are a lot of opportunities for students to engage in service learning, right? Service learning will put you in real world settings where you can come to better understand the different challenges and struggles that different ethnic communities face in Hawaii. And to me, I think for those reasons, I think that should be or could be a selling point as well too. And it's, for many students who find themselves, in an environment where they're the minority for the first time. In Hawaii, there really isn't an ethnic majority. So in that sense, everybody is a minority. It really, I think, puts students' lives in perspective. And gives them an opportunity, like I had mentioned, to develop different degrees of empathy and understanding for the struggles that different ethnic groups face. Yeah.
Thank you, Willie. John or Kaylee, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, Kaylee has some good stories. Just to give a little bit of a background, this past year, our study abroad office had this huge grant. So every week they did, working in collaboration with our faculty, they would pick a topic. So for example, one week it was on Japanese culture and how Japanese immigrants or Asian immigrants to Hawaii. And so, like, say on a Thursday, they would have a faculty lecture on that kind of topic. And then it would be followed by an excursion, like on a Saturday. And they would actually go, I think they went like an hour and a half away to a different town and kind of explored where the Japanese immigrants had first worked or lived. And so they kind of learned about some of these different cultures and backgrounds that make up the people of Hawaii. So I'll let Kaylee kind of talk a little bit about that, because she went to, I think, almost every single one, for the whole semester. Yeah, it was amazing.
I was actually just about to say that, because one of the best things that I did, it was called Clearly Kind Cultures, but I think they're handing it over to first year experiences next semester, because they were kind of just explaining that it was just kind of like a COVID thing for a smaller part of the community. But yeah, there was a lot of resources on the Hilo campus, actually, just to be able to either like get involved with the community, do the community service, or to just meet people. And so for the Clearly Kind Cultures, it was for people from different islands, from Hilo, and then from anywhere and everywhere to be able to get together and learn, like Holly said. So like we did the Japanese immigrants, we learned about the plantations, we learned about the different religions. They even like for the week leading up to finals, they even did like a Zen week where you'd go and like learn type of like artwork. And then they went to I didn't get to go on this one because I had a prior commitment, but like they went somewhere and like practice meditation. So like it was definitely very involved, and it was very like, I don't want to say like consistent, but it was nice to have that consistency, like a set schedule, like a club, but it was also very laid back in a way where you were able to learn, and we were able to do community service, which I explained to the coordinator that I love doing community service when I travel, because I understand that coming into a place that you are not native to can be very hurtful. And even though my intentions were good, I know that sometimes I'm so sorry. That sometimes it doesn't always come out as good. So I always like to give back, and being able to find the community service that I was able to meet people through and learn from was a really nice combination that I'm sure Manoa has. But for Hilo, they definitely had a lot of community resources like that and trips where you're able to go and connect and do more. So I guess that's another piece of advice for students coming in is like find those places, go to your RAs, like the people who have been there for a couple years, to be like, where do I go to the campus centers? Heck, I learned about a lot of stuff in the library. I went to the Hawaiian collections part of the library. I was there like every Tuesday and Thursday after class. They're like, oh, here's this, this, and this. And they just threw everything at me, and I just grabbed it. I ran with it, and it was really nice. But I didn't worry too much about my grades because I think I had to have a C or higher for passing because it was pass fail anyway. So I took that and I ran with it too. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Kaylee. You're so cute. John, did you want to add anything? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, you're all good. Yeah, I kind of to echo off with that. Definitely get involved, and kind of those like community. What's the word I'm looking for here? I don't know. I did some volunteer work, and that anthropology class actually gave me a way to do that. He took us to Waimea Valley, and we did a cleanup in there. And that was actually really cool too. I'm sorry, I don't know the word, but he did some sort of chant to like let us in, and it was crazy. The nature actually responded. It was like so still and quiet, and then he did it, and I'm not even kidding. Like birds started chirping, and there was this huge breeze that came through. And I don't know, that was really cool for me. But just experiences like that to give back, do some ocean cleanups, and I don't know, it kind of makes it feel a little bit more like your home. And if you're so far away from home, that can be a little bit comforting at times. So that was really cool. And then just another thing to touch on, Willie, you mentioned kind of being a minority. There's no ethnic majority here, and that's actually something I really appreciated. Being again from Iowa, I think it's 98%, 99% white people. I've never had that experience before of not being in the majority, and so yeah, when I first got here, it was maybe a little uncomfortable, and not saying uncomfortable is a bad thing, but it was new. I've never experienced that. That's not something you can really simulate back home. And so that certainly just gives you a new perspective right there. And I think it makes me a better person. I can empathize with people a little bit better. I'll never be able to understand other people's struggles, like, 'cause I'll never be able to actually live it and understand it. But I can kind of get a sense of how they feel just carrying. Not that anything was bad to me. I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but you get a little bit of that perspective. And I think that was honestly maybe one of my favorite parts of getting to come here. Yeah, it's amazing just how much being here grows you as a person. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, John. You definitely made sense. And I loved hearing your perspective. And I think everybody values your opinion. And the chant that he was talking about is called an oli. that's done as a kind of like a welcome or an opening. I always love hearing Oli. I always get chicken skin, so I can definitely see how nature responded, like you said. Um, we're kind of out of time right now. If there's any last questions, please put it in the chat. Dr. Kawai, thank you in advance for sending your slides, and then we can share that out with the group along with this recording if you all wanted to look at that or share it. Okay, I think those are just comments coming in, no questions. But again, thank you, Dr. Kawai and John and Kaylee for sharing your experiences and your expertise today. Is so amazing. I can't tell you how awesome it is to hear from you all. And I thank you everyone else for coming. I hope you found this as valuable as I have. You all are amazing groups. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Reina.
Kaylee.
Thank you.
See ya.
Mahalo, guys.